freue ich mich jetzt einmal, gemeinsam mit Ihnen diese Einblicke in die große, weite Buchstartwelt bekommen zu können und werde jetzt das Wort dann an Peter Jankins richten. Peter Jankins, I want to welcome you this afternoon. Peter Jankins, you are the International Manager of Booktrust, and I want to welcome you to this first Buchstartlounge here in Lower Austria. And I want to let you know that it is a really big honor for us that you are talking to us and that you are having the time, spending the time for us to talk about the beginning of Booktrust International, what the purpose, or let's say the intention of Booktrust International is today and in the future. And we also would like to know how Bookstart is organized within other countries, because there is always room for improvement. And so, dear Peter Jankins, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Ursula. And let me share my screen. Let's hope this is the right. Can you see that? Any
Yes.
Nods to show you're seeing the screen? Good, thank you. So grüß Gott, everyone. I'm afraid I can't do this in German. I'm sorry you have to put up with my English. And thank you very much for asking me to speak. And just to say that you can see two logos there, EU Read, of which I'm a member, and the Global Network for Book Gifting, which is part of EU Read and was started within it by Booktrust, are very happy that we have Bookstart Austria involved in both. And I'm going to speak quite quickly and cover quite a lot, so my apologies for that. I won't do it as well as your acrobatic Bookstart mouse, I'm afraid. But just quickly, before I talk about Bookstart worldwide and the network we've set up, just a few words about why I was interested in international work, and I've got a few notes on my side, so I am occasionally looking away from the screen, I'm afraid, sorry. But just to say a boyhood in India, and then returning to India and teaching in China, teaching in Middle East, and then a little in Central Europe. You might recognize the image. And it means I've spent many happy weekends in Lower Austria, visiting St. Pölten and Krems and Melk and Vienna, of course, and other places. And then working with aid and development in England, running the arts programs of the Africa Centre in London, and then running a Writers in Schools and Early Years organization, and then working at Booktrust for 10 years. And the international aspect of Booktrust, as well as having been a founder of EU Read 20 years ago, which are reading promotion organizations across Europe. We were also heavily involved in the European Literacy Policy Network project, which the EU Commission wanted to develop as part of their policy thinking behind the responses to what they called the PISA shock at the start of the 2010 period, particularly. And just very quickly to say, the PISA shock, the shock around reading and literacy in Europe has not gone away. Our recent study in the UK, perhaps the biggest study that's been done in the UK in recent times, even though it showed 70% of parents thought reading was important, most of them did not think it was a big part of family life or as something that was enjoyable for their children. All other entertainments and activities for their children were viewed as more enjoyable. And the pandemic has made things worse, as we know. And in England, our surveys have showed that 25% of the more disadvantaged are reading less now after 2 years of pandemic than they were before. So a little bit about Booktrust and Bookstart. Booktrust started a Bookstart project and coined the name 30 years ago. And there's a picture here of the founder, Wendy Cooling, who has traveled around the world a lot and spread the message. And some of you might even have met her. She learnt about the idea of the early years book gifting from a program that had started in the USA, in Pittsburgh, in 1984. And then it was followed up by a program started by doctors in Boston, Massachusetts, called Reach Out and Read. And then 2 years later, Bookstart started in the UK. And the program has spread across the world. The map shows you the members in our global network at the moment. And the network started because in about 2017, partly from some ideas from Japan, we decided that the digital possibilities meant that we could share experience across all these programs, and we could record presentations as a support for new programs in particular, and to share best practice. And it was to support innovation and resilience, and particularly in the UK, because 10 years of austerity following 2008 meant that the partnership structure had changed in the UK, and also the digital revolution meant that reading was changing. So let me stop sharing. We're going to just watch a little film about the spread of Bookstart across the world.
So I will try to share the screen. I hope it works. Do you already see?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope you will hear the presentation. Once again.
And just talking of Japan, it was interesting in the film. Very quickly, you might have noticed that Japan was the first Bookstart that used the name in 2000, and it was then followed very soon in East Asia by Taiwan and Korea, and then Canada and Australia, and then Europe followed after that. So the global network, we set up a working group of members from Canada, Japan, South Africa, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Finland, and originally Australia also, to develop the program. We spent a year working out how this would work, and we came up with our criteria and values that we thought were most important for best practice. And I just wanted to pick out the ones that we'll talk about most, and perhaps are most important, which are partnerships, perhaps diversity, and also the importance of evidence. And we started to have meetings focusing on specific areas of most importance to us. And most of what I'm going to be talking about relates to this slide, which is about the nature of the partnership working of Bookstart projects. And as you can see on the left, libraries are a crucial part. In all programs, libraries play a crucial role, but some members are library-led. Of course, Bookstart in Austria, but we have Welcome Baby in Canada, in Alberta, Better Beginnings in Western Australia, and an organization like the Reading Foundation in the Netherlands works primarily through libraries, though it's not library founded. And just some interesting things that have come to me from the various members who have been talking about library work. For instance, the Netherlands organization Stichting Lezen, their Bookstart pack gifts a cloth book, and that was interesting to me. They had to persuade libraries for the follow-up visits from parents that their books should be cloth books, and that all libraries in the Netherlands had to accept that they would be prepared to wash their books when they came back from the children. So I thought that was interesting. And the films on our site from both the Dutch organization and the similar organization in Flanders in Belgium, again, worked with libraries to develop the spaces in libraries good for families with babies and young children. And we've just had a project with libraries in the UK now, where again, we are focusing on the parents who don't go to libraries. And one reason is because they are anxious about taking their babies and their noisy children to libraries. So it's been quite important to work with families to get them, to encourage them to get to libraries. And it's also interesting about libraries in the UK at the moment that they are the core of our main funder, Arts Council England's strategy for the next 10 years about how the whole arts sector engages with the community, because they say the libraries are the organizations in our arts sector that are best connected to communities. And that interface is important. And also in England, even though visits to libraries and book borrowing by the middle class has tended to decline with the digital age, for the diverse community, the disadvantaged, the ethnically diverse community, that audience has stayed with libraries. And so again, it's felt to be the best route to reach the audiences that you most want to reach. But interestingly, the element that is perhaps unique about most early years book gifting programs is that they work through the health sector as their key partner. Some Stichting Lezen in the Netherlands, it's the health sector that gives a letter to parents, but the parents have to go to the library to collect their books. But in many other organizations, the actual gifting, the first book gifting takes place in the health sector. And you can see in the center of the screen there, the different places that organizations in the network gift. So for instance, maternity hospitals, health clinics, doctor surgeries, or home health visitors, which is the book trust model of Bookstart in the UK. And what it allows is a cost-effective reach to every family in a locality or in the country, because every family has to engage with their baby, with the health sector for various checkups. And it also means that you have trusted professionals from the health sector involved from the start. And that can be important for some families because they don't always like reading to come to them from what might be seen as the education sort of sector, which they might not have had good experiences with at school in the past. Some gifters, organizations gift through the professionals themselves. So in America, it's doctors, in Finland, it's nurses. Some do it through volunteers who work through the medical setup. So for instance, in Japan, they are volunteers who gift at the clinics. In Flanders, again, volunteers working in the health clinics. And the health sector enjoys this and finds it valuable because it supports their own agendas. So Finland, for instance, that started 3 years ago, was worried. They decided health clinics was their best route to everyone in Finland, but they were worried that the nurses were already too busy. Whereas in actual fact, the feedback from the nurses was, this is supporting our agenda so much, we want more of it. So it is very interesting that the health sector finds it valuable. Reach Out and Read talks about when the doctors give a book and talk about shared reading or reading aloud with the parents, and they can see the parent and the child holding the book, for instance, it is showing them quite a lot of things about their child's development that they wouldn't have got in another context. And also the health sector is very interested in the health and well-being importance of child development, and increasingly, as we'll discuss in a moment, shared reading supports that. And interestingly, from the American Reach Out and Read organization, their studies show that working with book gifting in their clinics actually means that the parents and the patients potentially, they think they rank doctors as better, their engagement as better. And the doctors say that morale in the clinic is better because of this interaction around something which is less medical. So that's very interesting. The images at the top, there's a logo of an otter on its back with a book. That's Bookstart Japan, and there's 2 images of the gifting there. Japan is very interesting because they started book gifting early in 2000, not because there was a literacy or a reading need in Japan. In fact, they were worried about Japanese young children being given too much stimulus and pressure from the education sector. They started it because of the support it gives for baby attachment, for bonding with parents, which then leads to family and societal cohesion, emotional security, resilience, sociability, empathy. And what's also very interesting about Japan is the importance they give to the actual modeling process. Their volunteers are trained to give the books to the parents and the child and show how they can interact. And what you get from watching those films is both the delight, the babies turning the books, their eyes widening, and the parents' surprise at how early the baby is responding to the book and responding to the book and them. So that's very interesting. And the image below is a presentation by a board member from Bookstart Japan, and he was talking about how the evidence for the wider health benefits and well-being benefits of book gifting are now established and confirmed. Just to mention COVID, the image below is of the director of Reach Out and Read in America. And again, he was saying their program, after 2 years of COVID, they realized the most important outcome of early years shared reading or book gifting or reading aloud was the health benefit, and that around baby bonding with the parent. That was the paramount reason they realized now for doing such a program. And I have a few images from the Scottish Book Bug program presentation last year, where a psychologist is talking about why this is so important for babies, not only the bonding, but also she was making the point that the parental emotion, particularly if it's stressful, is hardwired into babies, and therefore reading is an enormous relief of stress between baby and child, but also the very fact of the nature of stories and the nature of your voice as you read through a story, going through the change process from stress to a resolution, builds resilience into a child. And the image at the bottom is from the Australian organization in South Australia. In their packs for babies, they give an image of the neuron connections that take place in babies, just emphasizing that this period in the first year of life is the most important period for the person's lifetime in terms of their future. And just one thing that's quite interesting and surprising for us in UK, we're about to start a new campaign for parents, and the response from our focus groups and our research from parents was that the thing that would make them do more shared reading with their children was if the emphasis was put on baby bonding, baby attachment. So not something that would frighten them, but actually if the messaging was about baby bonding, baby attachment, either explicit or implicit, that's what they wanted support with more than anything else. And very briefly, just to draw towards the end after our health partnerships, one reason possibly why the early years book gifting sector is unique in the literature and reading promotion sector is because it is so evidence-based. And we've all heard following the science for the last 2 years. And it's possibly because the health partnership has always been so integral. Health sector professionals have to have evidence to get their funding to be allowed to support book gifting. So, for instance, the UK Book Trust started with a longitudinal pilot over 5 years and then extended, which showed the impact of early years gifting on educational outcomes at the start of school. That brought in government behind us, and that's happened in other countries with government support. The Reach Out and Read organisation here, again, emphasising that with disadvantaged communities, their Latinx communities, reading is happening 2.5 times more in the family from book gifting, and that in those first 2 years, the children who have had this shared reading aloud, their understanding is 6 months ahead, their speech is 3 months ahead. And this has led to the American Academy of Pediatrics saying it is an essential part of pediatric work that there is a literacy aspect. And finally, just of interest, our global network members were asked if they were advocating to policymakers for support, what would be the messaging that was most important to them. And they came back, it's the green part of this pie chart. The most important thing was societal benefits, the wider benefits, not the literacy or education benefit in itself, but the benefits of health and well-being and societal impacts. So to draw to an end very quickly, just to say the one big aspect and one big challenge for the sector is diversity. In the UK, a particularly important part, when 1/3 of our children are from Black and Asian minority backgrounds, is that books represent them, and we are working very hard with that. But we also work around disability, and the image in the center. The image in the center is interesting program in Japan, where they have developed with publishers 100 books that allow blind parents to read with Braille with their babies and their children. So that's a very interesting initiative. And on the right, you have the various packs that we give at Book Trust to children who are deaf or blind, partially sighted, or who have motor skills. And the whole book trust strategy at the moment is increasingly working to focus on disadvantaged children, those who need more support. And to finish, just to say the global network is, you might have noticed the map, with the exception of South Africa, which again is the most developed country in Africa. Most of the organizations are in the developed world. We are now looking to try and help support organizations in the global south to move forward with such bookstart type work. And very opportunely, last year, the World Bank started its Read at Home program. Again, early years book gifting in the countries you can see on that map, most in the global south, with one exception being Macedonia in Europe. So that's a quick overview of how Bookstart has worked and spread internationally. And just to say thank you very much for inviting me again. And I know many of you are volunteers in your various libraries, and it is an enormously important piece of work that everyone is doing, supporting such work, not just for its educational and literacy and reading outcomes, but for all the effects that it has on society as a whole.